Being 5:30 and we do have quorum, I will call this meeting of the June 7th Plan Commission to order. First, we will hear from our technical facilitator, Joe.
Thank you. Welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists, that is Alder's commission members and staff, have the ability to mute and unmute them. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if they do in this meeting, but no, they don't. Okay. Panelists can also rename themselves if they wish to add pronouns after their name. Please do not alter the naming convention otherwise. Also, please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the commission may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Zellers, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Next, communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Do we have any disclosures or recusals? Seeing no raised hands, it looks like we do not. The first item then is public comment. I do not see any registrants for public comment. Could you confirm that, Heather? Okay, no registrants for public comment. Next on the agenda, we have the minutes for the May 13th special meeting and the minutes of the May 24th regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion on both sets of minutes? Motion to approve by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. We will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand to object, the motion passes unanimously. Our schedule of upcoming meetings includes regular meetings on June 21st, July 12th, and July 26th, and a special meeting on July 8th. And please note that the July 8th meeting does start at 5 o'clock rather than 5:30. Next is the consent agenda. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an applicant has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by the various city departments, and on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak. These items on the consent agenda, along with any new business or other items, routine business, are addressed at the beginning of our meeting, and then people who are interested in those items can disconnect unless a member of the commission requests separation, in which case the item is removed from the consent agenda and taken in the regular course of business. So I will note those items that are proposed for the consent agenda. Agenda item 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Are there any requests by commissioners for separation? Seeing no raised hands, I will read those items then into the meeting. The first one is Agenda Item 2, Legistar 65659, authorizing the city's acceptance of ownership from the Nakoma League of the existing Nakoma neighborhood sign and decorative landscape garden located within Nakoma Park near the Nakoma Road and Cherokee Drive intersections in the 10th Alder District. Agenda Item 6 and 7 are related and considered together, Legistar 65512 and Legistar 64918, creating a section of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 621 Pioneer Road, 9th Alder District, from temporary agriculture to traditional residential consistent 3 district, and approving the preliminary plat and final plat of Fox Knoll on land at the same address in the 9th Alder District. Agenda items 8 and 9 to be considered together, Legistar 65514 and Legistar 65142, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to amend a planned development district at properties located at 3 Point Place and 581 D'Onofrio Drive, 9th Alder District, amending the general development plan and approving a specific implementation plan, and consideration of a conditional use at the same address for a school in an existing office building. Next is Agenda Item 11, Legistar 65137, located at 1344 East Washington Avenue, 2nd Alder District, Urban Design District 8, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional employment district for food and related good sales in an existing restaurant tavern. Agenda Item 12, Legistar 65138, located at 2621 Mullen Street, 12th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence and construct a new single-family residence. Agenda Item 13, Legistar 65139, located at 4145 Country Club Road, 10th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish an existing pool house, consideration of a conditional use in the Parks and Recreation zoning district for outdoor recreation, and consideration of a conditional use in the PR zoning district for a private club to allow demolition of an existing pool and pool house and construction of a new pool and pool house for Nakoma Golf Club. Agenda Item 14, Legistar 65140, located at 4706 Cottage Grove Road, 3rd Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the Commercial Corridor Transitional District for a vehicle access sales and service window, and consideration of a major alteration to a conditional use, planned multi-use site to allow construction of a drive-through automated teller machine at Rolling Meadows Shopping Center. So I will open the public hearing on those, and there are no registrants wishing to speak, so I will close the public hearing. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Are there any comments? Seeing none, we will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand to object, the consent agenda is approved. Moving on, then, the first item on our agenda is agenda item 3, Legistar 65385, amending the 2021 adopted operating budget for the Planning Division, Economic Development Division, and Department of Transportation, authorizing the Transit General Manager to file an application for a pilot program for transit-oriented development planning discretionary grant with the U.S. Department of Transportation, and authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute the associated grant with the U.S. DOT and the agreement with Teamsters Local number 695. And I understand that Heather has a few comments on that. Heather.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. Just quickly, I wanted to bring this item to the Plan Commission's attention because I think it will be one that will be coming back before you in the coming months and even years. It's an exciting multi-agency, multi-year project for which we have been awarded a relatively small grant, a $290,000 federal grant with a $100,000 match. It's for a mix of staff time and consultant efforts around support for the bus rapid transit first phase. And, we'll be taking this on in tandem with the Economic Development Division and Department of Transportation. And it will include, most relevant to the Plan Commission, a look at the development of that transit-oriented development overlay zoning district, which has been contemplated for some time, since 2013 when the zoning code was adopted, and then certainly again recommended in our city's comprehensive plan. Aside from the development of the TOD overlay ordinance, this multi-phased, multi-agency project will include an analysis of land banking opportunities along the east-west bus rapid transit route for inclusive redevelopment opportunities. So land banking, TIF will be, the use of TIF to support redevelopment along the corridor will be looked at. And then also really in the purview of the Department of Transportation, within an area surrounding each of the 31 stations along the east-west route, an infrastructure analysis, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure analysis will be completed so that infrastructure improvements can be prioritized leading up to the advent of bus rapid transit, which will hopefully start in the year 2024. So currently now we're trying to coordinate among different agencies our work plans for the next about 2 years. And again, we'll be back before the Plan Commission with components of this, but just wanted to take a quick moment to explain the bigger picture. Happy to take any questions, or we can move on to next items. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any questions for Heather about this item? Seeing no raised hands, I don't believe we need to take any action on that. Is that correct, Heather?
Actually, yes, we would appreciate, and I should have mentioned this in my comments, a recommendation to change the operating budget for 2021 to accept the funding.
Wonderful, thank you. So I will look for a motion on this, please. Commissioner Cantrell.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Heck. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a special item of business. Agenda item 4, Legistar 64442, the Planning Division update on the Odana Special Area Plan. And Heather did send out material about a week and a half ago, I want to say, to give commissioners plenty of time to review this important plan. And I'm not sure if Dan McAuliffe or Ben Zellers is going to be taking this.
I will be kicking things off and then handing it off to Urvashi and Dan as we go through the presentation.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'm sharing the screen here. So The Commission has seen this Odana area plan effort at various points throughout the process, and we're returning to you now as hopefully will be a kind of a final visit before potential introduction at the Council this summer. And so just as a very quick refresher, the 2018 City Comprehensive Plan asked us as staff to prepare plans to transition auto-oriented commercial areas into mixed-use activity centers. This area being one of those. It also set a goal, among other things, of having at least 50% of the city's growth in terms of new residences and jobs to take place in infill and redevelopment areas. Then BRT was just mentioned as well. This area will be served by BRT along Mineral Point Road. So that's an important consideration as we undertook this planning effort. And of course, we've had retail challenges brought on by COVID, but really predating COVID. And so we want to really create a framework with this planning effort that can be implemented over a long period of time to allow certain properties to redevelop at their own pace and allow other properties to continue with their present uses as long as they would like to do that. So as far as what we're going to share with you tonight, we'll look at updated concept maps, focusing on what's changed since the March Plan Commission meeting. Urvashi will look at some highlights of draft plan recommendations. A full list was included with your materials, in addition to really the full plan draft text. Dan will talk about proactive rezoning and official mapping, and then move on to a quick summary of public meetings that we had very recently. There were some questions that we had for the Commission that we called out in a memo that was included in your materials, and certainly would welcome any other questions, comments, thoughts by the Commission at that point. And then we have an anticipated timeline to wrap things up. So with that, I'll start with future land use. So we have made some changes to this future land use map based on not only the Commission's thoughts and feedback at the March meeting, but also feedback from the public through public engagement. As the Commission's well aware with our kind of color coding, purple, various shades of purple are mixed use. The brighter red is general commercial, car dealerships, retail, things of that nature. Employment is the pinkish color, and then the orange and brown are various types of residential. A few other things to call out in this map. Our approach to parks was to kind of create overlays of the general future park area. I'll talk a little bit more about that in upcoming maps. And we're also showing in this version two other things. A commercial core area, that as described in the plan is an area where we would really look to have that active ground floor commercial use, whether it's restaurant, retail, or services. And that's focused on a potential future extension of Odana if that area ends up redeveloping, as well as the intersection of Odana and Whitney Way. The other mixed-use areas could be redeveloped with single-use buildings that might be in close proximity to other different uses. So you could have a solely residential building next to a solely office building. And then another designation we're showing here as outlined in yellow, those are residential or employment-only mixed-use areas. So those are areas where this plan, as drafted, would really expect to see only residential or employment, not that retail or restaurant component. So we did that to provide some level of flexibility in those areas, which are right now designated as employment only under the comprehensive plan future land use map, while at the same time still kind of maintaining the most active uses along the more major thoroughfares. So just to touch on some things that we've changed since the last meeting, both of these areas circled. Number one, were changed from the previous version, which had residential only uses shown. So we did that in response to some public comments and thoughts and feedback from the Commission. Also, the Commission at the last meeting instructed us or recommended that we really make sure and allow for residential right up to the belt line. We've previously been showing primarily employment portions of that area. Those areas, number three, were change to a mixed-use designation within that residential employment-only mixed-use category. Area number 4 was changed from employment to regional mixed-use. Then we made some changes from regional mixed-use down to a less intensive style community mixed-use in those areas designated by. This map demonstrates or shows the changes to the comprehensive plan future land use categories that this plan is recommending in this draft. So the areas outlined in black have the previous comprehensive plan designation shown in the green lettering. So we're making some tweaks to the mixed use categories. Also recommending, as I mentioned before, some changes from employment to mixed use. Also, we have building heights shown and included within this plan, and made some changes to this as well. I just want to emphasize that, as you can see from the map, we have the most intensive styles of development in terms of the maximum building height, close to the expected BRT and high-use transit areas. So we really wanted to match the highest intensity potential uses with that highest level of transit service to make that land use transportation connection and encourage future employees and residences along that BRT line to be able to take transit. Having said that, we kind of created a three-tiered system to simplify things. We didn't want to create, every 2 stories and go 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. We thought, again, along the theme of having some flexibility of having 3 main tiers, breaking things up that way. So as far as changes and adjustments that we've made since the last meeting, these areas circled have been reduced in maximum height since the last meeting. Again, in response to some public comments and other thoughts from discussions with the public and alders and other folks that were involved in discussion and review of this plan. And then there are some areas where we're showing height increases from the last version the Commission saw in March. The biggest of those areas are west of Gammon Road. As we made some tweaks to potential future park space, we also tweaked the accompanying surrounding land uses and then bumped up potential heights along the belt line at Menor Point. As far as parks, open space, and stormwater management, our general approach with this remains very similar to the previous presentation, but we have actually expanded the general future park area designation in both of these kind of green hash marked areas. The westernmost area is in West Town Mall. Previously, the green asterisk area had been essentially the sole future possible park within that area, but we expanded that area to include some surface parking area to the west. Again, to provide some flexibility, realizing especially that in this case, that green asterisk area is being redeveloped right now. Part of that is into the Lenore project. And then the other area in the center of the screen, expanded that area to provide some flexibility for the Parks Division to potentially work with willing sellers to acquire properties as they come up for sale. We know that there will be some property owners in that area that will want to continue operating as they currently are. And so providing that flexibility for parks to acquire properties in a variety of different areas that are still relatively centrally located to mixed-use development, planned mixed-use development. That's important. As far as the street network, this is almost identical in terms of the planned future street network that we're showing to the March meeting. There have just been 2 very minor realignments, moving things maybe 100 feet or so, just in response to kind of some draft redevelopment proposals. But we are showing things in different kind of categories. So as outlined in your memo accompanying this presentation, what we're proposing as part of this plan is to show planned street connections for official mapping. Those are shown in dark blue, and that's That would be a process that would occur potentially after this plan is adopted, if the Commission and Council agree with this approach, to kind of lock in those areas a little bit more thoroughly than simply including them in the plan. Those areas would be officially mapped, and then new buildings would not be able to pull permits without potentially some additional process involved for those areas. So because of that, we wanted to avoid showing that in existing buildings to simplify reinvestment and remodeling of those buildings. So those areas are shown as planned street connections, as well as some other areas, especially in the research part. So Dan will talk a little bit more about official mapping further on in the presentation. The general goal with this approach, though, is to provide more connections to and through the planning area, increase connectivity for bikes, pedestrians, and car users as well, and make sure that the area becomes more transit friendly as well through public street network. Really creates that framework that I was talking about for future redevelopment to occur around that public street. As far as paths, pedestrians, and bicycle network, this map, very, very similar as well to the previous version. Just two quick things to call out. We're showing a bit more formal connection, potentially, from Odana Road at Research Park Boulevard to the existing bike ped path, shared use path along the Beltline. Then we did remove the possible shared use path along the east side of Whitney Way. Our transportation department is a little bit further along at BRT planning, and part of that has been looking at potentially buffered bike lanes on Whitney Way, and I think that that will be a kind of preferred alternative to increasing the bike provisions along that corridor. So that's what we've retained, the on-street bike lane possibility, and kind of eliminated the duplicative portion of the street path on the side. So with that, I'll turn it over to Urvashi to run through just some highlights of recommendations.
Thanks, Ben. Good evening, everyone. So some highlights from the recommendations that we're proposing in the plan. Relating to transportation, we're recommending integrating pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure like benches, pedestrian-oriented lighting, bike racks, etc., especially in the areas that we're identifying as the commercial core areas on the map. Also improving pedestrian safety and comfort on existing streets through safety measures like adding crosswalks, pedestrian islands, rapid flashing beacon, bump outs, etc. on specific projects that we have identified. For neighborhoods and housing, we're recommending supporting the development of affordable housing of all types and sizes that can serve a broad range of residents through some specific recommendations like exploring the use of height bonuses for projects that have an affordable housing component, also exploring the feasibility of funding affordable housing projects through TIF and other federal and state funding sources. Also encouraging a variety of ownership and occupancy structures, such as co-housing, condominiums, housing cooperatives, community land trusts, etc., to help provide more options, affordable ownership options in this area. Next slide. For economy and opportunity, we are recommending considering land banking in this area as a method to reuse some of the existing buildings to create an affordable space for local businesses as part of an incubator. Also using land banking to redevelop some of the excess surface parking into affordable housing, and also implementing the planned street network that we're showing on the map. Also exploring programs like commercial rent assistance and guarantee programs to assist some of the smaller and startup businesses, particularly those that are owned by persons of color, to afford spaces in areas where rent is likely to increase. Also providing funding for gap assistance to help some of the businesses that are likely to be displaced because of redevelopment to be able to afford ground floor spaces in some of the new mixed use buildings. For culture and character, we are recommending exploring the opportunity for possibly a new community center or a neighborhood center, some type of a meeting space that can serve future residents for this area, and preferably co-locating it with the new park space. Also, we're recommending considering replacing some of the existing street signs into more identifiable district logo, similar to some of the street signs that can be seen on State Street, Mansion Hill, Tenny Lapham neighborhoods, to create a branding for this area. For green and resilient, we're recommending enhancing the tree canopy on existing right-of-ways, fill some of those street tree gaps in terraces, also maximize the planting of new trees in terraces and medians, and proactively replacing some of the dead and dying trees throughout the planning area. Also, we are recommending requiring buildings and projects that are seeking cities' financial assistance through TIF, affordable housing funds, or other programs to demonstrate how they're exceeding with energy efficiency and sustainability more than what is required by existing building codes. For effective government, we're recommending exploring the opportunity for satellite facilities or a remote facility for government services to accommodate residents and businesses, varying schedules and needs, and also recommending proactively enforcing property maintenance ordinances for vacant properties. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Urvashi. Let me just share my screen as well. All right, can everybody see that? Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about proactive rezoning and official mapping, and just a little bit of background. First, the reason why we are doing it now is discussing it now, there is recognition during the Oscar Mayer kind of proactive rezone process that occurred after the fact that, if there was a chance that or there is a likelihood that proactive rezoning outcome would follow this planning process, we should begin the conversation during the plan process itself. So we're not trying to figure it out after the fact. But certainly we want to encourage development consistent with the plan and simplify that process. We shouldn't have to go back through a lot of process for things the community already said they want to see happen. And of course, discourage development that's detrimental to the character envisioned by the plan. So what we're thinking of this was occurring was certainly not a direct rezoning associated with the plan adoption. We're anticipating the plan containing a recommendation that if future official mapping and proactive rezoning occur after the planning process, that they follow these kind of recommendations. Okay, that would require a separate plan commission and council approval that would be separate again from the plan adoption. So first, let's talk about the street network that Ben kind of alluded to before. We're showing a couple different kind of streets that are recommended for official mapping and those that are not. So you'll notice a couple things that are going on. First, there is quite a bit more streets shown recommended for official mapping than in our previous plans that we have discussed in the Milwaukee Street as well as Oscar Mayer. There's a couple reasons for that. First, when we're trying to connect two streets, for example, on the north where we have a connection over here and connection over here, there's not a lot of wiggle room for where that path goes. And second, within the definition of front lot line in the zoning code is an allowance that officially mapped streets can be used as a front lot line. So that gives a lot more development, that can bring depth of development into the plan area. So we don't need to necessarily have that street platted immediately, but we can start that redevelopment process early, providing a lot more flexibility for where those first phases of development occur. You also notice that a lot of the official mapping are avoiding actually going into the buildings. The reason for that is we're not trying to basically try to stop operations of those facilities. We want them to certainly to continue to operate until they are ready and their owners are ready to redevelop. The official mapping process effectively prevents building permits from being issued in those areas. And it would just create an administrative burden and to some extent would be unfair to the property owner for minor things. We're really using this as, we're thinking about this as a tool to prevent new buildings within the path of future streets. So it's a little bit more aggressive in terms of the approach than the last time we spoke with Plan Commission. Next, we created 3 scenarios of proactive rezonings, kind of a light touch, a medium touch, and then a kind of more aggressive approach. And like our last time when discussing the Oscar Mayer plan, these are kind of different ideas we're exploring. We're not necessarily, you can pick and choose from certain ones. We can go a different direction. But they all kind of really created from getting the conversation started, since we don't have a lot of policy guidance based on a lot of past assumptions. So most of these proactive rezonings are occurring within the same general family. So the uses are generally similar. So these will not be creating non-conforming uses because they're moving from a commercial mixed-use zoning district to a different commercial mixed-use zoning district. Typically doesn't do that. It does talk a little bit about different intensities and a couple of things. So our first scenario is really focusing on kind of some of the surrounding pad sites around West Town Mall, changing those from CC to RMX. That does a couple things. RMX has a minimum of a 2-story height, so it would prevent single-story pad site buildings, strip retail, restaurants that are kind of standalone and single-story. It also does allow a little bit higher density than the CC district currently does. We're also recommending the balance of them all change from CC to CCT. And the reason for that was CC allows the existing private ring road, which is not improved to public standards, to count as a front lot line. So that is a minor change as well. Okay. All right. Sorry. Just a comment. So in the scenario number 2, takes a little bit more aggressive approach, rezoning or potential rezoning of the entire mall area into, that's weird, into the RMX district, as well as a couple other districts, couple other of the BRT stations along Mineral Point. Hey, look, it sounds like my cursor isn't showing up, so I'm sorry you can't see that. But generally between Grand Canyon and Oakwood Village, changing from SE, which is an employment district, to CCT, which is one of our mixed-use districts that would allow for a relatively intense mixed-use development with those station areas. Also moving further to the east after the Oakwood Village is a potential rezone of the CUNA Mutual property from UMX, which is a mixed-use district that kind of, in a sense, it requires almost like a PD approach. You need to get a plan approved before you can actually get the zoning. It hasn't quite worked out the way I think we expected it to when the zoning code was rewritten. So this is kind of simplifying that process of moving it out of that relatively complex district into a more traditional zoning district, CCT on the northern half, where we might allow more residential development, and SE, that employment district consistent with the balance of the research park to the south. As we move towards the next 2 BRT stations at Rosa Road and Whitney Way, kind of an expansion of the recently rezoned properties in the research park. So TSS to the west and TE at those intersections. Again, those are pretty flexible mixed-use districts. And then lastly, around the West Transfer Point, a pretty big expansion of the RMX district on the property just north, kind of just south of the transfer point, as well as some of the research park land. The last scenario is a pretty aggressive approach, using a lot of RMX at all the BRT station areas, a little bit larger of expansion in some of those within the by the West Transfer Point. and as well as the station, the final station to the west of the mall. The other thing that this scenario considers is changing the zoning from CC to CCT on Odana. And so there's a couple of things that are worth considering when discussing this particular potential rezoning. First, we think CCT would kind of encourage redevelopment to a greater extent than leaving it as CC. They both could accommodate redevelopments in their current form. CCT just kind of is a little bit more kind of planting a flag, say this is where we think redevelopment is a good place for redevelopment. The flip side of that argument is this area has some of the more affordable retail space. And so the question is, to what extent do we want to allow redevelopment and preserve affordable retail space versus really encouraging redevelopment and possibly losing that retail space over time? We certainly don't want to prevent redevelopment occurring. It's just how aggressive do we want to be in encouraging that in that locations. As Ben mentioned before, we had a couple public meetings. Actually, one of the great things about Zoom as a resource is we get to have meetings at different times. So we do one in the evening and do one at lunch hour, get different people when they're available. So there's a lot of talk about maximum building heights. Could that 8 and 12 stories be expanded further throughout the plan area? Is 5 the right numbers as a floor? Should it go taller? Of course, those are also balanced with some, I would say, some concern still that the heights are too tall. There was one comment that just concerned about the quantity of new streets in the mall area. Some concerns about how proactive rezoning could work, particularly related to the park overlays and how those would affect properties moving forward. How that overlay would work, again, those are kind of somewhat unique. The overlay to the east is really kind of signaling where the city might be interested in a voluntary acquisition in the future. The site in the mall area itself is kind of saying which is the area the most appropriate for dedication associated with redevelopment of the mall area. And of course, how stormwater management could work and how we are handling that in this plan. So I believe at this point, that's kind of the balance of our presentation, other than kind of rehashing the questions. Our timeline. So today is June 7th. We're here talking with the Plan Commission. Following this meeting, if Plan Commission is generally comfortable with where the plan is at and where the draft and the recommendations are, we do anticipate proceeding towards introduction. That could happen as early as July. Depending on the amount of changes that need to be made and kind of going through all the materials, just prepping those. We anticipate going through the BCC process July, possibly into September, and an adoption before budget starts in the fall. So at that point, that is what we have, and we can take questions when you're done with public comment. Okay.
Thank you all. And we do have some registrants. The first registrant is Eric McLeod, East Main Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak, representing CBL and Associates Limited Partnership. Eric, you have 3 minutes.
Okay,
Yes.
Can you hear me? Thank you very much, Chair Zellers. Again, my name is Eric McLeod. And I represent CBL Properties, owner of the Westtown Mall. Since it purchased Westtown Mall in 2001, CBL has had a positive relationship with the city, and we hope to be able to partner with the city in ongoing efforts to improve the Odana area. CBL continues to see long-term potential growth for Westtown and wants to promote its highest and best use for years to come. CBL has continued to invest significant resources in the property, including the new Von Maur store, currently under construction and scheduled to open in the fall of 2022. For its part, CBL continually looks for opportunities to serve the communities who benefit from Westtown Mall, including our customers and the many employees who work at our property. Now, the June 3rd staff report states that planning staff has met with CBL about the Odana area plan, and this is not entirely accurate. While there have certainly been communications between CBL and city staff in the past regarding a variety of planning matters, CBL only recently became aware of some of the very detrimental items in the plan, and CBL does not support those items. The issue of greatest concern is the plan's proposal to officially map new streets through the West Town Mall property. While the proposal notes that official mapping would avoid building footprints, the plan shows the establishment of new streets right up to and surrounding the current building envelope on property owned by West Town Mall and its anchor tenants. The effect of such mapping is, as the staff report notes, to quote, prohibit new buildings/expansions into officially mapped future rights of way, unquote. As we read that and as we understand the legal impact of such official right of way mapping, what this plan does is effectively prevent any meaningful expansion or change in the existing building footprint and potentially disrupts the ability to increase the density of the parking fields. By placing those streets on the official map, any future collaborative discussion about changes to CBL's property based on future market conditions will have ended before they begin. We must note that we believe establishing these new streets over or upon an existing developed commercial use amounts to a taking of property for a public purpose. And while the state statutes allow for the establishment of an amendment to a municipality's official infrastructure map, it does not contemplate laying out roads through existing developed uses. So we strongly encourage the city to remove the official mapping component of this plan. We remain interested in flexible zoning that allows for the densification and additional uses such as multifamily, office, entertainment, and the like, but fixing road rights of way now is counterproductive to those efforts and will harm commercial property owners affected by that mapping. So we look forward to working with the city.
Thank you very much, Eric, for your comments. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Janet Hirsch, Cedar Creek Trail, Madison, neither support nor opposed, and wishing to speak, representing Tamarack Trails Community Services Association. Janet, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. To the commissioners, thank you for allowing me to speak. Tonight, as Commissioner Liddell said, I'm representing Tamarack Trails. We're a community that lies 1 block north of Mineral Point Road in Westtown and consists of 320 homes with residents who are very engaged in the Odana Road area. I spoke at your March 8th meeting on this topic. At that time, we had submitted a letter to the commissioners with some of our concerns, and we thought that that had been posted and been available to you, but we found out later that it was not listed on Legislature. So it was finally posted on March 16th. So therefore, I'll be repeating some of the comments and concerns that we brought forward at that March meeting. Some of our concerns are being addressed by the plan, but we still have some concerns about the updated plans. One of the concerns is that places to live seem to be a focus of the area. And while we advocate for a range of housing styles, we still do not see any of the missing middle appearing on the plans. This would be the type of housing that would appeal to families. Instead, we see up to 8 and 12-story buildings along Mineral Point, Gammon, and Whitney Way. These locations are targeted by community development for affordable housing, and we all know that that a lot of the studio and 1-bedroom apartments are ubiquitous to the developers as they strive to reach the affordable housing goals and still be able to turn a profit. Our concern is the massive buildings are a direct contrast to the character that we would like to see and would fit well with the neighboring communities on the other side of Mineral Point Road, and also the homes that are at the west end of the Odana area. Another concern that we have is the environmental impact of the increased number of roads which are shown throughout the plan. We also felt that the green space, natural and open areas, and stormwater management were listed as a top priority on the moral badness survey that was conducted by planning department or planning division, but we are not seeing that that's necessarily taken into consideration. Then we are also concerned that the preferences are lacking and should be emphasized, the open spaces and minimizing the roads. Let's minimize the asphalt and the concrete and reduce the number of streets and eliminate the Westfield and Odana Road extensions. So again, please take the time to read our March 2nd letter, and thank you for listening to our concerns.
Thank you, Janet. The next registrant is William Hoyt, Lakeland Avenue, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions, representing JBL and Associates. Are there questions of any of the registrants? Seeing no raised hands, we will move on to questions of staff. Are there questions of staff? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I've got several questions. Maybe the first one is for Dan. You mentioned the different scenarios that we're considering for land use maps, and you mentioned that there would be very few non-conforming uses created, if any. I don't know. I mean, I assume there could be a few just based on some differences in the tables, but you also then mentioned that many one-story buildings, for instance, in an RMX district would become non-conforming. Well, you didn't say non-conforming, but they would become non-conforming building forms, correct? And if that's true, can you discuss how that might play out in the future in terms of improvements to a one-story building? Would it be subjected to the same ordinances about the percentage of improvement that could be done on a one-story building without creating a bigger problem, if it's about form rather than use?
Yeah, certainly. So I don't need to share my screen for this one. So there's a couple things that are very distinct between non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures that are dimensionally non-conforming. The non-conforming use is, that is something where the use is no longer allowed in a district, and that's a much higher standard, and it comes with a lot more process, right? So there's a limit to how much they can expand. Sometimes it's challenging for buildings to get financing. If they sit vacant for a certain period of time, they can't go back and reuse that facility. A dimensionally non-conforming structure, that is all over Madison. Think about many of our central areas where structures or houses are on very small lots. Their setbacks are dimensionally non-conforming. Typically, what happens in those scenarios is any future expansion of the building envelope needs to be consistent with the current zoning. Sometimes, that doesn't make sense. For example, if there needs, a small retail building needs a storage closet, for example. They're not going to put in a 2-story storage closet. That doesn't make sense. There's a very good variance process that would kind of go through that and say, this is probably not, this isn't the intent of the code, and it's probably just fine that this relatively small expansion occur. So we don't see those things as kind of being on the same plane. So we have a lot less concern about dimensionally non-conforming, but certainly any new construction of a standalone building would need to be consistent with the current zoning. And if that is RMX, it would require that 2-story minimum.
And if somebody is expanding, more than a storage closet, but they're adding some square footage in addition, what would be the process then for getting that approved? It wouldn't come to Plan Commission, or would it?
My guess is not, unless there's a different conditional use threshold. If it was a permitted use and it would just need a dimensional variance, yes, that would be going through the Zoning Board of Appeals, and zoning staff would kind of be taking care of that. I thought Heather had her stand up.
Yes. Heather indicated she had something to add. Thank you.
Sure. I wanted to add that for small additions, I don't believe that variances would be needed either. So there's some level, and I don't know exactly what that level of investment or level of scale is, but they would be able to do small additions through administrative approval through zoning. This is really protecting essentially the full redevelopment of sites and ensuring that new buildings would be a minimum of 2 stories. And by this, I mean, if it were rezoned to the RMX district or the traditional shopping street district, it's really the CCT and the CC districts that do allow for freestanding single-story commercial buildings.
Thank you, Heather. Did you have further questions, Alder?
I do, but first, just thank you to Heather and Dan for explaining that. That was helpful. Since no one else has her hand raised, I'll ask another question. Thanks. I'm still, I know several of you mentioned this, but I'm still just a little bit confused about the park overlay districts. And could you explain that again about how that works in practice? And what that hatched area is all about, really. I know you mentioned it, but I still had trouble following it.
Yeah, so that's those 2 hash marked areas are just general areas where the Parks Division would look to acquire a potential future park space from sellers that are looking to sell property. And so we took the approach of generally designating those areas because we didn't want to pick a specific parcel and say this is going to be the parcel that we're going to have a future park, because that's very limiting. And there might be a business there right now that wants to continue operating for the foreseeable future, and that could potentially lead to us not having any park space. Whereas designating these areas can sometimes even generate interest from property owners that see this and say, yes, I'm looking to sell my building. City, are you interested? And so that was our overall approach. And just to provide a few more details, the thought is that would be a park in the western area of about 5 or so acres. And then in that central area, 1 or 2 parks of up to 10 total acres. And just to give you an idea of the size of that area, that green hash marked area, not counting street rights of way, is a little bit over 40 acres. So it just provides the city with the ability to pursue a few more properties through acquisition from willing sellers than it would if we just said it has to be this parcel.
Thanks. I think I get it now. And so it's not a future land use map feature, really. It's and your mention of the expected park sizes compared to the overall hatched areas was illustrative. Thanks. It now makes sense to me.
Yeah, and Dan, maybe if you could cycle back to like the future land use map. So we do really view this as kind of an overlay, and there are underlying future land uses for those areas that don't become park space that are within that general future park area.
Thanks. I have one more question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm thinking, it's a comment mixed with a question. I'm thinking about all the wonderful things that Urvashi mentioned in her portion of the presentation, and those all seem like important matters that the city is very interested in, but I'm curious as to why those are part of the Odana area plan, as opposed to why aren't we working on those for, I mean, maybe Alder should be responsible for this, but why aren't we working on those for citywide policies? Odana's a special place. I'm glad that they're being considered in their plan, but it seems kind of exclusive to the rest of the city. Is there a reason for starting here or with those policies?
I mean, in some cases, yes, certainly there are some things that could potentially be considered citywide. In other cases, sometimes those recommendations kind of narrow down a little bit. For example, there's a tax increment district in 46 that overlaps part of this planning area. So there are some recommendations that relate specifically to that and kind of reviewing that as far as potential funding for affordable housing and new street connections in the future. So there are some of those aspects that could be looked at citywide, but what we tried to do as we kind of really went into some of the details of some of the recommendations is how can they be applied to the Odana area, or how do they apply to the Odana area, and also what tools are there in the area right now to potentially implement some of these, or what tools could be used within this area specifically in the future to implement some of these recommendations.
Thanks.
So I don't know if Dan or Heather or others have anything else to add on this one.
I don't see any other raised hands, so it looks like that did it. Did you have any further questions, Alder Heck?
I see that Dan has his hand raised, but I don't have any other questions. Okay.
Dan, did you want to add anything?
I think one of the other reasons that we want to, some of these certainly are, some policy ideas that could be applicable citywide. But a lot of times they stem from comments that we've heard specifically in this planning process. And we want to make sure that we want to be responsive and kind of put some of these really great ideas down as a starting point, understanding that they might go beyond this particular geography, but maybe a pilot starts here and then takes citywide. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I have a question again on the park overlay. How does that affect the redevelopment of those parcels included within the overlay? And I'm assuming, since we're looking at 5 acres at some of those sites, or at least both of those sites, and the parcels in the bigger area that's identified range in size, I assume 1 acre to 2 or 3 acres, or maybe 5 acres. I don't know if they're that large, but it appears to me that if the Parks Department starts buying one parcel, because a lot of the area is divided by streets, the adjoining parcels are going to be targeted then for pretty much a park use. Again, how does that, affect the development of those adjoining parcels? I think that can staff kind of address that? My hope is that the Parks Department, after this plan is approved, starts looking very carefully at these areas, and talking with property owners about their desires.
So it looks like Heather wants to take that one. Heather?
Thank you, Chair Zellers. This is a really great question. And I do want to stress that, this isn't an overlay district, like a zoning, overlay or any sort of regulatory layer here. But I think what it does serve as a strong signal to existing property owners that, we really need more parks in this area if it's going to transition to accommodate hundreds, thousands of new residents. And these are the areas that we're really focused on. We've worked hard with the Parks Division to identify, spacing and sizing, et cetera. So it's a strong signal to existing property owners. And, for a large enough redevelopment opportunity, it could also provide a way for that property owner to directly provide parkland. Instead of providing fees for that development, they could directly provide parkland. Now, this is not a perfect situation. We've tried to identify land for a downtown park, as Alder Revere knows, for years, as shown in the downtown plan. And so it's not a perfect situation, but it really, I think what it does is it sends a strong signal again that these are where we envision future parks They're much needed to serve this growing and evolving population over the course of the next few decades. And property owners might take an opportunity if they're otherwise looking to either redevelop or sell to be in touch with the Parks Division. And you're absolutely right that the Parks Division can also take a more proactive opportunity within these areas in the meantime.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're identifying these areas, but I think especially around the mall area, that's going to be a very difficult one, I think develop unless there's a large scale development that is proceeding, and because of the fees and those sorts of things, they identify a part of their plan as a park and open space. But identifying a large area may be somewhat difficult. A smaller park might be the outcome. My other question is, one of the speakers that talked about identifying, or where on the plan does it identify the missing middle housing, and those aren't developments of 8 and 12 stories, and even 5 stories. The missing middle are the townhouses and those sorts of types of development. Where would that be included within this plan, which is fairly intensive, shows fairly intensive development?
Go ahead, Dan.
Sure. So I can do that as well as backtrack a little bit on the park. So we've kind of taken an approach with some of the height is to be very flexible in terms of land use and height. This is probably one of the plans, of the plans that I've worked on. This has by far the most amount of uncertainty. And so we can certainly create, and we to some extent we did create some initial concepts that envision where lower density housing might go, where higher density could go, and to some extent the height recommendations reflect that. The challenge is we have very little idea about which properties are going to redevelop and when. So we could create this very great site plan that has all varieties of housing, but how likely is that going to come to fruition? If the mall was going to be developed, if everything was going to be demoed and started from scratch, it's a much easier answer. But that's not the kind of the approach that we're in. And one thing that we do know is looking at other mall redevelopments and infill is they tend to have, or they almost always have some level of lower scale housing, partially because from a marketability perspective, if you were going to try to develop as much as you could all at once, it's unlikely that you'd be able to build and rent or sell 8 and 12 story buildings for the entire site in the amount of time it would take for the holding cost would be pretty high of that land. So we are fairly confident that some level of lower scale housing will occur. Exactly where is a question. And I'm just going to backtrack a little bit on the park answer specific to the West Town area itself. You might recall in our initial phase, you can kind of see my cursor right now, that area, that was the block that was shown for the park. And I think it was very good criticism and a good point that is the area that is seeing the most recent investment. And so kind of that is why in that area we want to provide some additional flexibility. Maybe it doesn't go on that block, it goes on the block to the west or southwest. But we do expect some level of open space in this process through the parkland dedication process associated with residential development. So, but again, trying to provide more flexibility in where that occurs. I think the original concept showed if everything was going to demo and start from scratch, that might be the perfect location for a park. But again, we're not in that environment. This is really going to be, we're trying to set this up to be a very incremental growth, and when property owners are ready to redevelop, this provides that framework.
Okay. great answer. And the missing middle may be similar to what we see at Hilldale with townhouses along the stretch of Midvale Boulevard. I'm assuming that's what you're kind of envisioning, at least in part. My next question is Attorney McLeod raised concerns about the designation of the official mapping streets, and it appears that you have talked to the mall owners, but apparently, obviously, more discussions need to occur there, and that the streets that you've identified to officially map does kind of block the center in. And I'm glad you now show the buildings, because I think that shows where the proposed streets are, mostly in, it looks like, parking areas. But could Heather or whomever on staff kind of further address Attorney McLeod's concerns and comments? I'm assuming that you've talked to our attorney's office about official mapping and the effects of that, but can you address that a little bit further?
Heather, it looks like you have your hand up for that.
Sure, I can start, and then would certainly invite others to weigh in as well. So I think, this recommendation does fall just short of actually officially mapping through the existing building, and we did that. We're recommending that as a strategy to continue to allow investment to occur to the existing mall. We expect that it will be here for years and decades to come. And if you look at it really closely, it also allows for fairly significant expansion of the mall in all directions, except within what would be the officially mapped future rights of way. And so I think, we're looking at an enormous area where we know that we need to break down, create a new urban grid if we're actually going to support, let's say it's even 50, 75 years down the road, the level of intensity that the plan can support. And so we need assurances as a city that those streets will be there at some point in the future, even if it is decades down the road. And so I think that, again, when I look at this map here, I do still see ample opportunity, not only for obviously maintenance and small changes to the mall, but even significant ones outside of those officially mapped rights of way. And we'll continue to work with the owner definitely. But I think that the city in the end will need to really balance this issue and think carefully about, well, what is the appropriate street network that we really need to guarantee at this point to help guide the direction of whether it's additions to the mall or major redevelopment moving forward. And I think Dan's point that he made earlier is another really important one. Something that even the existing owner might wish to do at some point is to sell off a portion of that parking lot for development. And without having an officially mapped right-of-way for a new building to orient to, that's not possible. We do not have public streets in this area, and we need that organizing factor in order to support even infill in the existing parking lot in future years. And so I do want to reiterate that point as well. I think that this is something that as staff at least I think we're seeing as a trade-off, but also an important partnership to help guide further investment in this property over time.
Thank you, Heather. I see, Dan, that you have your hand raised. Did you have something in addition to add?
And a couple other things to note that the plan is really laying out a conceptual street network. It's using the information that we have in front of us, which is just kind of aerial photography, building. This is not a survey, and some of the things, particularly on the eastern edge of the mall, where yes, it's the street that we showed was relatively tight to the existing structure because when we were kind of thinking through it, we wanted to preserve that development depth between the mall in Gammon. When we look at those block depths, what makes sense, the most sense for the future building footprints of the size that's economical, that's marketable. And so, but it's, if you need, these are, again, very conceptual layouts. If it needs to move 20, 30, 50 feet, a lot of times that can be accommodated. And if that's something that needs to happen during the official mapping process, again, that's separate from the plan approval. We just want to make sure that whatever is officially mapped is we're not officially mapping kind of cul-de-sacs. We're not creating that situation where something is dead end. We're mapping a logical and cohesive network that we could see the beginnings of a future street network. So thinking about how you get in, get out, and trying to be somewhat flexible within that.
Thank you, Dan. Did you have further questions, Commissioner Cantrell?
No, I thank Dan and Heather for the explanation and also the showing the street network map overlay here. I think that's very informative. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I guess 2 quick comments following up on the park overlay and the missing middle. I understand the park overlay process. Thank you for the explanation of that. I think that this slide in particular, I just, maybe it could be labeled or clarified a bit more. I'm just thinking, if a development was proposed, particularly for that western area where, someone might come forward with a proposal that meets the land use guidelines for that area. But as a neighbor, I say, wait, I thought this was going to be a park here. So I think it could be a little confusing maybe for future proposals that come forward, but understand that we need to, delineate an area and hopefully encourage some parkland dedication. I also just want to say I like in discussions about the missing middle, I like using the higher height limit in this situation, thinking that especially paired with the recent changes to the zoning ordinance, I think it makes it, more flexible in terms of depending on the size of the site that you compile, between what's a permitted use and what you can fit on the site, you might naturally attain some of that missing middle housing. So I like that. But my question, 2 questions. In the RMX zoning, the second story that's required, is that we saw a proposal not long ago for just on Mineral Point Road, and they did kind of increase the height in the corner to make a future possible mezzanine. But does RMX require a real kind of occupied second story?
Okay. I see, Heather, that you have your hand raised to respond to that.
Sure, it does, but it can be small. It doesn't have to be a full second story that includes the entire building footprint. It could be a usable portion of, it could be a partial second story.
Okay.
I guess is what I'm saying. So yeah, I mean, it's, it may not be the impetus for a significant amount of change, but at least it's requiring a portion of a building to be 2 stories. And we think it's, it's very permissive. It's a very permissive district. And given that it's right along the future bus rapid transit corridor, we think that it's likely that if redevelopment is contemplated, it will likely be for more intensive uses. That's the hope.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. And then in terms of the height map, I just wanted to confirm that those height maximums would be a hard maximum. Would there be a way to go above that?
It looks like Ben has his hand up for that one.
I guess that's somewhat of a question for the commission. One of the things that we wanted to get your thoughts and feedback on was how to kind of address that height maximum, and is there a situation where the commission would want to allow bonus stories for implementing affordable affordable housing or implementing green building techniques. And if bonus stories are an option that the commission would want to include in this plan, would they be bonus stories to get up to, maybe a 12-story maximum, or to get up to the 8-story maximum, or would it be bonus stories potentially above and beyond that? So we're very much interested in the commission's thoughts and feedback on that approach. The way it's written right now, it's pretty hard cap, but we, at least that's what's recommended in the way that the plan's formulated, but we're certainly interested in.
And it looks like Heather has a comment on that one too. Heather?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to build on Ben's comments and mention that so when the city adopts a plan that has height maximums, that is not the zoning code. And so there is a difference between an adopted plan and the adopted zoning code. There is an interest that's mentioned in the comprehensive plan to, and many of you are aware that in our downtown area, we do have a height map that dictates the maximum height allowable. And the only way to exceed those heights is to do a plan development zoning and meet certain standards that are very, very high threshold standards. One of the recommendations in the comp plan is to expand the use of such a thing, to expand the tool that is the downtown height map to other areas of the city. And we talked a little bit with the Plan Commission in December about testing that out in the Willie Street district, as you may recall. We do think that in the future, there may be an interest in developing a wider spread height map that would in fact be in the zoning code and would have maximum heights as a regulatory framework. This is a plan recommendation, and generally the maximum heights and adopted plans are followed by the Plan Commission and or council, but it isn't as absolute as the zoning code tool, which we currently use in our downtown area.
Got it. Yeah, I was thinking of the downtown map, so thanks for that clarification. I like the idea of it. I was thinking more the 8 stories can be a little tricky, which is why I was thinking that maybe a little flexibility would be nice. Just, from a construction standpoint, you hit 5 or 6 stories with one building type, and then you have to move, to concrete and steel. And sometimes I wonder, are the extra 2 stories going to make it worth it to do that? Or, do you need to get to 9 or 10? And are we kind of missing out on getting that additional density by having kind of this middle height limit? So also, just while you mentioned the affordable housing height bonuses, I'd love to hear others' thoughts on that. I think it's a really exciting idea that finally we could do something for affordable housing. I do have thoughts and, would love to get Lynette's thoughts just on how that could be implemented and monitored, likely by CDD, because certainly there's a limit on affordable housing funds from WIDA and even from the city, and it would be great if we can expand affordable housing to something that, a developer that isn't experienced in those very specific tools can still incorporate affordable housing in their developments to get these bonus heights without having to go through a more complicated structure. And, how can we have the city involved in compliance of that? So longer discussion, but that is an exciting development to see.
Thank you, Commissioner Solheim. I agree. Did you have any further questions?
No, thanks. Not at this time.
Thank you. Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. My question is actually extremely related to Commissioner Solheim's. I'm wondering, with the question posed about recommending providing bonus stories for affordable housing or green improvements incorporated into multifamily developments, and the complexities that providing those bonus stories could create, if planning could just provide a little bit more detail on what those potential complexities could be, so that we're making sure to be aware of all of those.
Heather has her hand raised. Heather.
Yes, thank you for raising that. So this is complex. I think if bonus stories were easy, we might have them more frequent. You might see them more frequently. I will say that one of the main concerns as we work with the city attorney's office on this is really enforcement. And Commissioner Solheim alluded to it a little bit, but a a developer could construct a 10-story building, earning 2 bonus stories within that 10-story building by committing to a certain level of affordability over time, income restrictions on a certain number of units. Now, if 5 years down the road, they remove the income restrictions, what does the city do then? We're not obviously going to go out and demolish the top 2 stories of buildings, practically speaking. And so one of the things that we've been discussing that we would certainly like to bring back to you more coherently, I think, at a later date is, can we, the city, create certain restrictions on things that we fund? As a portion of the affordable housing that's being created, a large portion, that's subsidized directly by the city, could it be treated differently because of that agreement and financial arrangement with the city? And so that's something that we're exploring. I think, in some ways, the same question goes toward sustainability features. You could commit to a variety of sustainability features, and then as a building is being constructed, or 5-10 years down the road, for some reason, remove those. What's our enforcement mechanism there if we the city have granted bonus stories? So the bonus story idea is something that we continue to, I think, wrestle with as staff. We do have some precedent for it in plans, and then some precedent for it in the ordinance. I'm going to give you 2 quick examples of where bonus stories are handled in our ordinances. One is in Urban Design District 8, so the Capital East District, where a developer can literally check the boxes, choose options by which to achieve 2 extra bonus stories in many cases. That's one where the developer has a menu of options they can choose and get bonus stories approved by the Urban Design Commission. Another example is in our downtown area. The downtown height map has a few areas that will say something like 5+2. And the +2 is really the allowable bonus stories that the Plan Commission can consider if certain standards are met. And those standards are, I think, number 13 or 14 on the conditional use standards list. So those are 2 examples we have. We also have, from 15-20 years ago, some plans that have recommended additional heights if affordable housing or structured parking is included, a number of things. And those are less stringent because they are just plan recommendations and not zoning. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to have an extra long response to that question, but I do want to really acknowledge the question about complexities and say that, yes, absolutely, bonus stories, that's a very complex issue that we're continuing to work through with the city attorney's office and others.
Did that get to your question, Alder Lemmer?
It did. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I'm in favor of the bonus stories for affordable housing if the complexities can be worked out. I think it's a great idea. And since the state really limits our ability to require it, coming up with some sort of concept and increasing the density, I think is a great way of maybe getting around that. So good luck, Heather and staff.
Did you have anything else?
No, not right now, thanks.
Okay. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Not a question, but a comment, just reiterating what Commissioner Cantrell said. And I also don't want to sell sustainability short. I think that also has a lot of potential for bonus stories. And I'm not sure if it was Commissioner Solheim that was kind of leaning towards bonus stories, meaning above and beyond what the current recommendations were, but I tend to agree with more is mostly better. Just a comment, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? I do have one, and that's on the street cross sections. Both of them do have parking in them. And while I understand that there's some potential desirability for that, and perhaps that's the way we want to go. I do have a concern related to our TDM goals and reducing vehicle miles traveled, and the potential of simply shifting parking from the developer site onto the parking provided along the edge of the street. So I'm wondering if that was considered in light of our TDM goals and reducing vehicle miles traveled. Ben.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I would say that shared on-street parking can be a way to potentially address some TDM concerns. It's kind of a naturally built shared parking where everybody, as a member of the public can use it. Whereas if we end up having those kind of separate parking spaces for private redevelopment projects one by one, those tend to be exclusive and managed solely by the private developer. Whereas in examples like this, it's the city that manages it and can manage it for maximum turnover to make sure that people are parking there for shorter term trips. It's, I think, kind of a reason why some of our more successful shopping streets like a Monroe or an Atwood or Willie Street tend not to have as much off-street parking that they need to provide, or oftentimes will even look to provide as private redevelopment projects. It's because there is that on-street shared resource that's available. A potential example that's related is just the idea of having kind of shared parking through structured parking as well, where we have, in many cases, parking garages that serve multiple uses. Whereas if all those uses were served kind of individually, there would be likely an over provision of parking that half the time sits empty. And
so the concept or the hope is for the on-street parking is that there would be a mechanism to assure, as there is on your example was Monroe Street, to assure that it's used for short-term parking rather than an employee, for example, parking there all day.
Right. So yeah, I mean, there are a variety of things that can be implemented to try to manage it for shorter-term parking and not long-term parking. And if the thought, depending on what's decided upon here and through the rest of the process, the thought is that we should include some sort of language in the plan to encourage that if these connections are made, and we could certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions of staff? Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I don't have a question, but staff did ask the Plan Commission to address these two options.
That's the next thing we need to do. So okay. Go for it.
Okay. Well, my preference would be option A, because I see in my neighborhood option B, and I think it's very awkward. Especially, I would think, especially in a kind of a very intense, dense commercial area like what we see at Westtown and with the proposed street potentially extending through it. So my preference would be option A.
Are there other commissioners who would chime in on that? Commissioner Solheim.
I just have a question on option B. Would that be buffered by pavement, like you see in University Avenue, or just the cones, which is what you see kind of in Bassett area? Or is that to be determined, I guess?
Dan.
I think that's to be determined at this point. It probably would need to be some level of flat pavement for a variety of reasons, plowing, drainage, but just understanding how, those two kind of functional features probably would dictate that it is pavement, but we're not at that level of design specificity. And this is just kind of looking at big picture ideas.
Ben, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so just kind of piggybacking on what Dan was saying, the purpose of these cross sections is less to show kind of exactly how this would end up being constructed in the future, and more really to explore how much right-of-way we would want to ask to be reserved, with the exact kind of street cross section to be determined when the plat is done, or when the actual construction project is considered. We've been in some other processes where a section gets included in the plan and then kind of gets thrown out and revisited when it actually comes time to build the street. So we just want to make sure and really reserve the right amount of right of way. That's the purpose.
Okay. I mean, I like the wider, I like the more right of way for maybe a more comfortable bike lane, but I do agree with Commissioner Cantrell that in the Bassett area with those cones and stuff, it's not particularly intuitive, and in the winter is difficult for biking, in my opinion. But I think that reserving more right of way makes sense.
Alder, did you have a comment on this one?
Yes, thank you. I'm actually confused now, but I would say I prefer buffered bike lanes as being safer for cyclists. And so I think I agree that the larger right of way is better. But I think in some situations, I think option A could also work. But for Odana in particular, if that's going to be the kind of the main road in and out of this area, I think buffered bike lanes are preferable. But I agree with Commissioner Solheim about it'd be better to have pavement, but that's kind of getting the cart before the horse. Thank you.
Well, I'm not hearing consensus, but a slight preference for the wider. Is there any other input on that particular question? Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. I agree with Alder. I feel like having the buffered or the space set aside for the buffered bike lanes is going to be a safer option. I don't have much to add other than that, because he covered exactly what I was thinking. Okay. That would be my vote.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hagenow.
Yeah, I'll keep this short as well, but I would also agree with Alder Heck, Commissioner Solheim. The buffered bike lanes would be my preference. And again, to the design of that can come up at a later time. So
thank you. Commissioner Cantrell, you had?
Yeah, I guess I would just like to see a wider sidewalk, wider terrace. Having additional right of way, I think, is probably a good idea. But and obviously we haven't designed it yet. But who knows what's going to happen with the bike lanes? So, but I would go with a wider right of way, and hey, that allows lots of options, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, let's go with that one.
Okay. Does that give you what you need on that one? Did you have something to add, Dan?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention we just got volume projections for Odana today, and those volumes would likely lead towards a buffered bike lane anyways. Had we had those numbers when we were putting together these graphics, we probably would have included that on both options. So,
thank you. Okay, so I would like to move on then to the other questions that staff posed. We already talked about the bonus stories. to encourage green building and or affordable housing. So what I heard there was that commissioners are in favor of aiming to do that, knowing that there are still some things that would need to be worked out in order to make that workable. And I'm seeing shaking heads, yes. So raise your hand if I'm misinterpreting. Okay, then going on to number 2, Odana Road Extension. Oh, we talked about that. Then the proactive rezoning approach. And so we have 3 options that we were looking at there. What is the thinking of commissioners? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I understand some of the concerns about proactive rezoning, but from the discussion about use versus building form, I'm not overly concerned about this in this circumstance. I think I kind of prefer scenario number 2 and not going as far as scenario number 3 in order to keep some of those relatively low cost commercial spaces more viable for now. Those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Alder. Anybody else on that question? Commissioner Solheim.
I agree with Alder Heck, although I'd also be open to kind of a mush between scenario 2 and 3, where the RMX is at the BRT station stops. I think that makes sense, but I agree with preserving some of the general commercial in the Odana area.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments on that? Commissioner Cantrell.
I would agree. I would see that a hybrid between 2 and 3, and I think Commissioner Solheim may have come up with that hybrid that might make some sense with the BRT along Mineral Point and at the stations having RMX. But I'd like to hear the other commission members weigh in on that too.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. I agree with that mush, as Commissioner Solheim put it, approach. Are there other, Commissioner Hagenow?
Yeah, I also would agree with Commissioner Solheim and coming up with some kind of a mix or mush would definitely work. Otherwise, I guess I would lean more towards scenario 3. I think it does a pretty good job. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments about this question? Seeing no raised hands, I think we have a pretty good consensus on a kind of a combination between 2 and 3. So is that pretty clear? If to staff, yes. Okay. Then the next one is official mapping of streets. Comments or input of that? Commissioner Solheim.
I guess I'm generally supportive of how it's laid out. I think, it makes sense, especially as you think of maybe a single story building being plopped in the middle of the parking lot that messes up a future street network. I do think that, some additional dialogue between the owners of the mall, and then also I think one of the property owners on the section to the east had written in, just trying to line up these street sections maybe a little more specifically with where some of their outlots, future outlots for development could occur, could maybe make them feel more comfortable. But I think for this large of an area where there really is no street network within there, it's kind of necessary.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cantrell.
I agree with Commissioner Solheim. I think that as staff explained it, I think that official mapping the streets as shown are appropriate. I think some additional dialogue with the mall owners should occur, obviously, but I think that we need to do that now, or we may lose the opportunity to have a network that actually makes sense in the future when we need it.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. I agree with Commissioner Solheim and Cantrell. Are there other? Is there other input on that topic? If commissioners can just give me some kind of an indication, okay, it looks like commissioners agree with that approach. Then question number 5, if we can get the street network off of the screen, please. Yeah, thank you. Is the commission comfortable proceeding with introduction to the council? Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads and thumbs up. So yes, commissioners are comfortable with that. Is there anything else before we move on to the next item on our agenda? Seeing no raised hands, we will move on to agenda item 5, Legistar. And thank you very much, staff. I mean, really good job on this plan. So thanks for all your work on this. Legistar 65511, creating a section of the Madison General Ordinances to amend a planned district to approve an amended general development plan on property located at 6321 Town Center Drive, 3rd Alder District, and creating and approving a specific implementation plan. And we do have registrants for this. The first one is Eric Schrader, Metro Terrace, neither support nor oppose and wishing to speak. Eric, you have 3 minutes.
I had to promote Eric to a panelist because of the device he's on.
Okay.
Like his audio is connecting now.
Eric.
Yeah, Eric, for some reason your audio is not connecting. Eric, you could try leaving and coming back in, see if that works. Or try using a different device. If you can hear us.
Maybe we will, if this is not working, we might move on then to agenda item 10. We'll give it another minute or two and then.
Okay.
So it's not looking like
not looking like he looks like he may have left and not rejoined yet, but
Okay, let's move on to agenda item 10, and we will come back to agenda item 5.
Oh, Chair, we do have someone that just came in on the phone.
Okay, let's try that.
That looks like his number, so let's...
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. *6 to unmute, Eric. Again, *6 to unmute yourself. I cannot unmute you on the phone.
Okay, Eric, it looks like you're unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Perfect. Thanks. I would have been upset. So just a little quick background about me. I'm speaking as myself, but I live right across the street from where this is going on. I'm a member of the condo board right across the street there. And then additionally, too, I'm a member of the Madison Fire Department. So, I understand with this whole project, I can't necessarily, cancel it per se, but I guess my biggest concern that I have is the amount of street traffic that this is possibly going to generate on Metro Terrace. So within Town Center condos, there's 111 units, and 2 of the buildings are scheduled to have to enter the parking lot, like the individual occupants enter the parking lots off of Town Center Drive. So if you take the 111 Town Center units plus the ballpark 50 units, you're looking at like roughly 160 people entering on and off of Metro Terrace. And for any residential street, 160 individuals coming and going is obviously a lot. So I guess my solution to this then would be to make the only entrance for that apartment complex off of Town Center. So when it's over there, then it's not going to be competing with other housing. It's not going to impede with the fire station, and it's really going to limit the amount of traffic on Metro Terrace. I recognize it's not going to stop all of it. Like I think of me, if I'm coming home from the grocery store from Metro Market, I would take Sprecher all the way up, and then again, that's just going to limit that amount on Metro Terrace. So again, thanks for hearing me out here, and that's all I have to say. We're just in favor of moving that entrance to Town Center.
Thank you, Eric. We will be coming back to find out if commissioners have questions, so don't go away. The next registrant is Kevin Burrow, University Avenue, Middleton, in support, and I've got him as not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions representing Kanothi Bruce Architects. And those are our 2 registrants. Are there any questions for either Eric or Kevin? Any questions for Eric or Kevin? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there any questions of staff? Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. Now we talked through traffic a little bit at the public meeting. I was wondering if there was somebody from staff available who could talk through the entrances and the traffic generated by the apartments.
Chris.
Good evening. I would point out that engineering reviewed the submittal, the proposal, are requiring a traffic demand management plan as part of the approval for this the proposal. I don't know if it's been submitted and it has to be reviewed, or if the plan has to be submitted still, but it will be reviewed, and it's something that they take into consideration. Regarding the design of the development, I would just point out that 2 of the buildings enter off of Metro Terrace, while the rest, the 3rd building on the west, and all the surface parking that does enter from the north. So there are 2 ways to, I would say, more of the traffic will be entering from the east off of Metro Terrace, but it is not entirely, it's divided between the 2 portions.
Thank you, Chris. Did you have any follow-up questions, Alder Lemmer?
That makes me want to ask a question of Kevin Burrow as far as the status of the traffic demand management plan. But if the body would be okay with me asking a question to a public registrant.
Is the body okay with reopening the public hearing? Okay, we will reopen the public hearing. And Kevin Burrow, please. So Joe, if you could get up Kevin Burrow. So tech facilitator, if you could get up. Very good. Kevin.
Yes, thank you very much.
You heard the question.
I did. We have not put together the TDMP at this point yet. We will be doing that as our next step in the process. But as in regards to the access drive off of Metro Terrace versus internal, what we are doing is utilizing the grading situation on the site coming off of Metro Terrace just for those 2 underground parking entrances, but all visitor parking and then access to the third building would be off of the Town Center Drive. And I also want to clarify that there is a future street that's platted just south of our development that connects to Metro Terrace, which would also provide another opportunity to further limit traffic going up Metro Terrace once that street is installed.
Thank you. That's it for my questions right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder Lemmer. Are there any other questions of Kevin Burrow while we have the public hearing open? Seeing no raised hands, okay.
Could Kevin show the site plan? I think that would be helpful if we could just boot that up and he could show us the driveways and the access points.
Chris, could you get that up?
Am I unmuted at this point?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks, Chris. Yes, this is the overall site layout where you can see we have the one access drive off of the center of Metro Terrace, which leads directly to the underground parking. Because of the grades, that's a much more gradual and easy access into the basement. Then the internal drive is raised up at the first floor level at a higher elevation, which connects off of Town Center Drive. And then just to the south, there is a future platted street along the southern edge of our property, and we're showing a dash connection through there. Once that street is installed, we will make that connection as well. So the way these internal circulation is laid out is basically to utilize the existing grade as best as possible.
Commissioner Cantrell, did you have any?
Yeah, could you show the bigger picture area, maybe the location map? Yeah, that's great. Okay. Okay, that so traffic will be basically going from either the south from Milwaukee Street or from the north using Town Center, or from the south using Milwaukee Street up to using Metro Terrace. Okay, that's all I need. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Heck.
Thank you. While Kevin is still on the line, Kevin, can you just tell us, I think you mentioned 200 parking spaces emptying out onto Town Center. Maybe I heard that wrong. And then about how many parking spaces are in the two buildings that will empty onto the other road?
I did not quote any numbers previous, but let me get to my plan as well.
Kevin,
yes, I'm here. Sorry about that. Okay. With regards to the two buildings with the underground parking, we have approximately 24 stalls in one building, and then 26 in the other. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, I apologize, but it's very minimal. At most 50 vehicles coming through on that drive on Metro Terrace.
And then the surface lot plus under the other building is probably more like 100 or something like that. Just kind of want a relative size difference between what will be coming in and out of the two driveways.
Sure. So, okay, here we go. We actually have just 24 stalls in building 1, 23 in building 3. So that's just 47 stalls off of the underground parking. And then the surface parking, we have a total of 33 parking stalls and then another 23 in the underground. So it's 56 stalls off of the surface and building number 2.
So the two driveways are vaguely comparable in terms of traffic volume?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. That was my question.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any more questions of Kevin Burrow before I again close the public hearing? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there further questions of staff? Are there further questions of staff? Chris, I think we can take down the picture now. I would then be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I'm going to be recommending that the Plan Commission find that standards can be met for the zoning map amendments and plan developments, and rezoning at 6321 Town Center Drive from amended general development plan to amended GDP, and recommend that we forward the zoning map amendment to the City Council with a recommendation of approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Lemmer. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell?
Just briefly, I guess I'm not as concerned with the traffic that this development will generate. I think it's dispersed and it's, I think that people think there's a lot more traffic for multiple family development than actually it happens. So I think that this is appropriate development for this area. And that's why I'm recommending that the rezoning and amendment be approved.
Thank you. Alder Lemmer, did you have any comments?
Okay. Thank you. I couldn't unmute. I just wanted to say that I am supportive of this development. The size and the design complement this area quite well. This is greatly needed housing. We had a public meeting a couple of months ago and received positive feedback there. I look forward to seeing the traffic demand management plan. I also agree that there won't be an influx of a dangerous level of traffic by any means, but that will be helpful to see. And I also do want to remind folks that the developer will be moving forward with one building with 24 units first, and then the other 2 buildings will be coming based on market conditions. So it could be a little while before those 2 buildings are constructed, and that will also give us more time to deal with those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Anything else before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 10, Legistar 64805, located at 216 South Hamilton Street, 4th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence and construct a building with 4 live-work units. And I think like the last agenda item, we will go straight to our public comment. The first registrant is Kurt Steggy, Cambridge Road, Madison, neither support nor oppose, but wishing to speak. Kurt, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. While I have appeared before the Plan Commission in the past representing the interests of the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation, I want to make it clear that today I am merely appearing as an individual. I'm here to raise really 2 points relating to the request for demolition permit for 216 South Hamilton, which I don't think I would call residential. It's being used for commercial purposes. In any event, item 1 that I have, I want to simply point out that this is another request to demolish a significant piece of Madison's vernacular architecture. The staff report references a construction date of 1894. I think the actual initial date of construction was the early 1850s, just about 170 years ago. Over the past months, there have been 5 development projects that have been approved by the Commission, resulting in demolitions of nearly 30 vernacular buildings. That includes the project on West Wilson and South Henry, the project on West Washington and North Bassett, the project on Winnebago and Russell Street, and the project at on the 400 block of East Washington Avenue. This adds to that total, keeps us under 30, but pretty darn close to 30. There's certainly a range of age, quality, and condition in those vernacular buildings. The one that you're looking at tonight is in relatively good condition and certainly has significant character and age. The other item that I'd like to mention is referenced on page 4 of the staff report. And I'm going to quote under the demolition approval standards there. It says, the demolition standards also state that the Plan Commission shall consider and may give decisive weight to any relevant facts, including the reasonableness of efforts to relocate the building. I'm simply unaware of the extent to which relocation efforts have occurred as to this building, and but I'm not in a position to say that they have or have not occurred. But thank you for the opportunity to offer my comments.
Thank you, Kurt. The next registrant is Chris Gosh, South Hamilton, Madison, support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Are there questions of either of our registrants? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Chris Gosh a question, please.
Chris.
Are you there?
Yes.
Hi, I'd like to hear about any efforts to relocate the building as mentioned in Kurt Stege's comments.
Yeah, so we did have that as a very early discussion with planning staff. That must have been in early 2019, probably maybe late 2018, when we were looking at the logistics of that, the repairs that needed to be made in order to facilitate relocating this. We would not be able to take it back through the alley onto Doty because of grade and clearance issues. We would have had to take it out through Hamilton Street, which then would have necessitated taking down two fairly mature street trees. That was issue number one. Issue number two was that the net result of this house has undergone so many modifications and alterations through the years that the owner had spoken to 2 or 3 people about it, and there was just no value to it. It would have been gutted anyway. So there was no real interest in doing that. In addition to the logistical challenges of getting it relocated.
Thank you. That's my question. Thank you.
Are there further questions of our registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Thank you, Kurt and Chris. And I will ask if there are questions of staff. Seeing no raised hands, I do want to make a comment. I think that Kurt raised a very good point, and we don't have Marcia here to comment as she ordinarily would, but we are losing vernacular buildings at a very, very rapid rate, and there actually are some other ones that Kurt Stege did not mention. But what we have is a comment by the Landmarks Commission about buildings themselves not being historically or architecturally or culturally significant, but being concerned about losing our vernacular architecture. I'm not saying that this one is one that we should, kind of draw the line on or anything like that. But I just think as a commission, we need to really be aware of what we're doing and how fast we're doing it. When these buildings are gone, we really do lose something in terms of the look of our city and our ability to understand where we came from. So thank you to Kurt for bringing this up. And I'm sorry Marcia's not here to speak to it as she ordinarily would. Again, are there questions of staff? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I'm going to be recommending, obviously, that the commission find the standards are met and approve the demolition permit for the single-family residence and construct a building with 195 square feet of commercial space and 4 live-work units, condominiums at 216 South Hamilton Street. But I'd like to speak to the motion too.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yeah, I am. This is a very charming building. I walk by this building a lot. I live just a few blocks from the site, and I concur that we're losing a lot of our vernacular buildings downtown, especially the ones of this era, 1850s. I think that's pretty special. I think the building that it's being replaced by is interesting. Workforce housing is obviously needed. But, I am concerned that because this is only like a 2 blocks or a block from the square, that the intensity of development on this site should be a lot more than a 2-story building. And, so we're replacing a pretty much a single family house with 4 live work units, which I think is underdevelopment. And that's a concern I have. And obviously I have a concern that we're losing the charming house, but we're underdeveloping as a result of it. But I guess I see that this does meet the standards, so I guess that's why I'm recommending it be approved. But just wanted to point that out, that I think that when we do this, we should get something out of it more than a 2-story, 4-unit building. So that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. And I concur. Are there other comments? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agreed with Commissioner Cantrell's statement, and I just wanted to convey that I heard from Alder Verveer that he supports this project and the demolition permit request. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, we will come to a vote. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the business by members. Is there any business by members? I'm going to just add one other thing. We will be seeing some additional development proposals that are going to be bringing similar kinds of issues to us and on a larger scale. And one of the things that we hear about is that buildings have lost their interior integrity and look. We don't control that at all. So that really shouldn't be a part of the claim or discussion. And the use of the building, adaptive reuse, is a good thing, not a bad thing. So the fact that a building is not being used for what it was originally constructed for really is not a sensible argument for throwing away a building. So we will be seeing some more of these kinds of proposals, and we do need to really consider what we want to do as a city and as a plan commission. So thank you all for your thoughtful consideration of these. I do appreciate that. Next on the agenda is the Secretary's report.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. First, reporting back on the recent Common Council actions. At their last meeting, last Tuesday evening, the Council did act on the Plan Commission recommendations, including the ordinance changes to allow for more housing and to allow for housing at the small and medium scale to occur by right in certain districts. And so I want to thank the Plan Commission again for all of the hard work on that. I know we started discussing that formally at the Plan Commission nearly a year ago, and I want to especially thank Alders Limmer, Heck, and Alboros for their sponsorship of that ordinance. It was a very close vote, and we're prepared to track the progress of the impacts of that ordinance moving forward, and expect to report back to the Plan Commission and Council in the coming years on any changes related to the passage of those ordinance changes. At our next regular meeting on June 21st, I just want to highlight a few things. We should have, pending a recommendation from the TPPB, an amendment to the Hanson Road Neighborhood Development Plan on the far northeast side and an associated development proposal there at 4205 Portage Road, including a rezoning for future multifamily development. And then I'll mention also 6201 Mineral Point Road, so on the far west side of the city, an amended planned development to demolish a skilled nursing facility for a new skilled nursing facility at Oakwood. And then I'll move forward to our July 12th meeting and mention several items. Actually, sorry, one other on June 21st, the last one on the list there. The council did refer to many committees and commissions a resolution regarding temporary encampments in public parks, and staff will try our best to provide some guidance to the Plan Commission along these lines. It's not something that would typically fall under the Plan Commission purview, but we'll provide a brief memo on that item. And then on July 12th, the next regular meeting, several items that I anticipate some discussion on. First, on West Wilson, West Doty, and South Hamilton Street, the renovation of the Dane County Public Safety Building and a significant addition to that building. Next on the list there on Zor Shrine Place, and this lies within the area that you discussed at length tonight, the Odana area plan, proposed rezoning from employment to higher density residential zoning district for the construction of a 479 apartment units in two separate buildings. 702 Flom Road, this is one of several conditional use proposals that will be coming to you from the Madison Metropolitan School District. This one related to additions to La Follette High School. Next on the list, 849 East Washington. This is in the Capiz District area, demolition and conditional use for a new 14-story mixed-use building with 226 apartment units. 3802 Regent Street, another proposal from the Madison Metropolitan School District, and this is for the renovation of the Hoyt School and the construction of an addition to complete an alternative high school in that location. And those are, I think, the main items that I anticipate discussion on July 12th. And then finally, just want to mention we do have a special meeting again on July 8th, and that will be from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock at the latest. The main subject of that meeting will be coming back to you with the next iteration of the sub-area planning process moving forward. So we spoke with the Plan Commission about a new framework for district planning, and we'll come back to you with a template for what such a plan could look like and a little bit more detail on that for more input from the Commission. With that, I think that's all I'll share at this point. Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any further announcements? Commissioner Cantrell.
Good. Heather, maybe not at this meeting, but at a future meeting, update the Commission on the old MATC site, where the Dury Hotel is going, and the other hotel on the upper part of State Street. And those projects seem to be either not happening or lost in space. So I guess I'm just curious where they're at.
Yeah, we can do that at a near future meeting.
Thank you.
That's a good question, Commissioner Cantrell. Thank you. Anything else? Alder Heck.
Thanks. I'll just add that maybe a review of hotel projects around the city that are not happening, because I can think of several more would be interesting.
Okay, thank you both. And the next item on our agenda is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Do we have a second? Seconded by Alder Heck. I will assume unanimous consent on adjournment unless I see a raised hand to object. Thank you all very much. Take care.